One, two, three, we're in. So hello guys, welcome back to my I think 12th or 13th by Julia tutorial around there. So in this video we'll be talking about, in the last video I told you that we'll be building on the skills we had learned. So I went and thought that the best thing we could build that could utilize all these skills were, and even add some that are outside the scope that we could learn, but I still find myself mentioning, was something like a lottery game. So you see, you want a lottery game is something that allows user to enter, let's say, a certain number of numbers and then checks against the numbers that computer generated, and if the number is lucky to have guessed any number correct, then there is a prizes or something like that, and if did not, then, and if guessed all of them correct, then that is the jackpot win, and if did not, then it shows you that he or she never generated the numbers and then will generate. This mini series might take 2 videos at least, because I think it's something long, but at least I know I will have covered a lot of things for you guys to be ready to start building your projects outside there. So guys, this is really important, so please watch both of these two or three videos, and if you will be if you will, then I'm sure you will be ready to do anything. So let's get in directly. So in this video, first let's create a new file called lottery.julia. So yeah, so we have that file called lottery.julia. So in this, let's make a function that generates users computer, then we make a function that allows users to enter numbers. Computer generator, yeah, let's say computer generator, and then it takes no argument, obviously. So you see, at least here we're reminding ourselves about functions, something we learned I think in our 2 or 3 videos back there. So now we have to make something called an array. We take in numbers that a computer generates. So yeah, it takes in numbers that the computer generate, and so yeah, numbers, and then we want to allow computer to generate number 3 times. This is not the optimum way of doing it, but at least I will have covered everything. I will show you exactly by what you learned. So not that I'll have covered everything, I'll show you in what you learned. One, I is equals to range 1 2 3, that is what we covered. And but if you find this still add, you will say in for I in 1 to 3, which I think is always simpler for me. For I in range 1 to 3, I think this is it simpler. I should have shown you this one again the previous time, but I showed you that equating sign, that this is simpler. And then now we want to generate a random number, r number. Since this is a variable, a random number, you see, function, you are advised not to use underscore or camel casing, but for variable names you are advised to use underscore. So that is it. We have a function in Julia called rand, which is used to generate numbers. We want to generate random number between 1 to 49. So okay, before we get in too far, let me show you what it does exactly. So you see, if you enter that one, first time it generated 13, 14, 16, you see, so it's generating number every time separately. So, and you see, we normally have a better way of doing this one, which is usually called seeding. You can go check how to seed your program in generating numbers so that it can do better when using rand. So, but that is out of this scope. But if you want to ever get better, then these things I'm telling you are really important and are applicable outside there. So go and check how to seed random generation of numbers. So we generated the numbers, now we needed to add them to numbers. Okay guys, okay, let me show you. You still remember range? So here I want us, whenever we are creating this array, then we generate the first 3 numbers, which are default numbers, even before this loop generate, then it has to have numbers. So there's something called stripping in Julia. So these 3 dots, by default A range doesn't have values. It's just an indication of range. It doesn't have values by default. But if you start stripping the range, then the values are generated. Now here we're stripping values. By default it was just a range which would have held index number 1. You can go check that out. And it's better if we cover everything in a clear way. You see, if we do this, you see it's one element. It's saying it's one element array, which is in integer number 14, but only one element. Now what if we strip something like this? You see it become a 3-element array. So that is why I stripped it over here, so that it can be 1, 2, 3. The numbers by default is 1, 2, 3. Now we want to replace for each time the loop will be going. The first time it will replace the first number. So I hope we can see numbers, and then the first time we replace with the number that is generated. So the first time number 1 is replaced, index number 1 is replaced with the number generated. The second time, the third time. I hope you guys can see that. And then after you run this, you finish the working, you want to return numbers. So let's run this program and see. Comp numbers that. This is not the only way you can do this, but at least I'm showing you the easiest way and what I think is easy for you to understand. I know there are tons of ways that you can do this lottery that you see computer generated numbers 16, 15 and 10, and every time, trust me, every time you run it, it will be generating different numbers. So I think by now you can understand we've covered computer generating numbers. Now let's see how we can make user get the numbers. Let's create a new function called user numbers. Trust me, you can also do all these things without using functions, but I still think that using function makes it. At least you can see block of code that does one thing together. That is what a minimal function after all. A block of code that does a specific thing. So that is it. This code will reuse, and we have to end. So you guys, I hope you can see that you can use functions inside loops inside functions. So at least I want to be explaining everything because I expect you to be relating with what we covered earlier. So but when I remember, I will be. Now this time around, we are not, computer is not generating number, user is entering the number. I don't think I've covered anything about getting user input, but this is the point I will mention. So if you watched this video, you are lucky. So number is equals to, most of these languages that are used for data analysis, is always hard to mention getting user input. But if you do something like project like this, then I find myself explaining. Now you usually use read line Now you see number user number is, and then you assign the number into number. But now you want at least to show something to the user. Print, you see I'm using print, not print a line, because there's something I want to show you. Enter there, and then there is this dollar sign. Dollar sign is used to insert variables inside strings. That is it. Dollar sign is used to insert the variables inside strings. Enter the first number. Now it will be enter the first number during the first round. During the third round, enter the third number. You will see it, and then you will understand it after we start running the program. So print enter the third number, and then it gets user input, and then by default the user input is always string, but you want to make it integer. So we have a helper function called parse. Parse is used to convert data types. So that is it. So we can again reassign the number variable. Variable can keep changing value. So I want to make it clear. I could have used the function again here, but I don't want to start confusing you guys. So it's parse, and then you want it to be integer type. Let's say it's 8, because I'm sure numbers between 1 and 49 are still in the size maximum number. So then you want it to be the number, and then you want again to update the number like we did over here. Okay, but this time time round it's not random number, it is this number that we are assigning to the index I. So guys, I cannot explain everything, so now let's see user numbers equals to the number. You see, we are calling the user number function, which we expect to be returning something. Return number. We expect it to be returning the numbers after they have been replaced. Then let's print them out over here. Did we print computer numbers? I want us to type this function code for calling everything that we are calling something. I want to print down over here so that we can make our code cleaner. They could have stayed there, but I want us to make this code clean. Okay. I did print here instead of printing ln, but it's still fine. But I will cancel this one by entering something that is really not acceptable. Now you see, I do not do exceptions because you see I cannot start handling errors. That one is advanced, and even I won't cover. I will let you go read the documentation about catching errors. So enter the first number. Let's say it's not helpful after you show user the computer generated numbers, because I may decide to enter all those numbers. So at least you do 7. But let's say I did not see. You see, the second time I run, it does not show me the computer generated, but you say start entering. And then you see computer generated this one, I entered this one. So guys, you see I never got even nothing. I got nothing. So I think this will mark the end of this video. We've covered a lot. Some of them you did not know, like reading line, like passing, like this stripping, like arrays. So guys, these things you need to check them. If you have any questions about what we've covered here, then go check. You can ask them in the comment, and I'll be glad to get you up to the speed. So for this video, that is the end. The next video we'll start checking what the user gave against the numbers that the computer generated, and then finally what is the mark. So goodbye.